Right. All right, so
Property.
I'm ready.
Hi, everybody. Welcome. I am Phil Favero, and I'm with the Climate Stewards of Greater Annapolis. Still, a number of them are in the room still. Yeah. Tonight we're going to talk about pipelines, and I'm really looking forward to it, as I'm sure you are, because we have several speakers talking about pipeline issues in different areas of the region. So let me ask a question. How many saw Carl's email message about this event? Okay, some of us, but not all of us, which tells me that not all of us are on our email list, right? Some of you have signed up to be on the email list on the table coming in. But I'm going to pass this around with a pen, and if you'd like to be notified about events sponsored by the Climate Stewards, and you're not already on the email list, or you haven't signed to be on the email list, please do so.
Oh, there was another sheet out there.
Yeah, there was
Same
another
thing,
one
so
as
if we
well.
sign that one out there.
They're the same, yeah. If you sign that one or you sign this one, we have your name and address. So pipeline issues reminds me a bit of what we were talking about a year or so ago in terms of fracking. It's got a local dimension, right? It causes local problems, and it also has a global dimension to it because it contributes, pipelines contribute as wood fracking have contributed to the fossil fuel infrastructure. And there's a strong conviction within the climate stewards that preventing additional fossil fuel infrastructure is necessary and now. So again, pipelines like fracking have this local dimension and this global dimension. And what happened with fracking in Maryland?
Banned.
It was banned. Okay.
Yeah.
So I think that should be our goal, right? To ban additional pipeline infrastructure in Maryland and the region. That should be our goal. All right, so speaking about pipelines, our three guest speakers tonight, I want to introduce them and give the order of their presentation. First will be Malinda Clatterbuck from Lancaster Against Pipelines, Pennsylvania movement. Second will be Tracy Cannon, who will be talking about the Eastern Panhandle protectors of the Panhandle area of West Virginia. And then finally, Cristi Demnowicz, did I get that? All right, great, thank you, from the No Eastern Shore Pipeline Group. And all three will be talking about their issues in that order. And what the speakers preferred is that we'll take a little time after each of the presentations so you can, you don't have to write notes, try to remember what the first speaker said. We'll just take about 10 minutes or so after each speaker, talk about what she said, and then we'll move on to the next speaker. And then at the end, we'll have some time for general reflections as well. When we are about to end, and remind me, Carolyn Ricketts, wherever you are, right there. Carolyn is going to talk very briefly at the end about upcoming events and also about opportunities for community solar in Maryland. So we'll do that right at the end. Any questions? All right. So let's go ahead with Malinda.
Thanks, everyone. It's great to be with you tonight. You're Phil?
Phil.
Phil. I haven't met you before, sorry. So as Phil said, I'm Malinda Clatterbuck. I'm from Lancaster County in southern, south central Pennsylvania. Have any of you ever been to Lancaster County? A lot of, oh my gosh, almost everybody has been. Excellent. So, you know, Lancaster is known for Amish, for our agriculture, for our factory farms, unfortunately, which is another issue to get into. But I was born and raised there. I'm 10th generation Anabaptist. My family came in the early 1700s, both sides of my family, 1710, 1718. My father was 9th generation, the first generation to leave the church. So I was not raised in the Mennonite church, but I am presently a Mennonite pastor. So I guess I, you know, left Lancaster, moved all over the country, Montana, Kansas, Washington, D.C., back to Lancaster, and I'm a pastor of a church. So I've come full circle, I guess. Our church has strong ties with the Friends meeting in Lancaster and also with UU Church in Lancaster, and are really involved in a lot of social justice things. I feel very fortunate to be there. And the work that I do there ties in well, I think, with the work that I found myself involved in as an activist, which I was not before the Atlantic Sunrise was proposed. I was a mother, a family therapist, an educator. I've taught preschool, high school, college, middle school, just about all of it. And I've been youth director, and now I'm a pastor of young children and families, young families at our church. So mostly in issues or jobs of service I've worked. And I find that community organizing comes out of that very easily. The things that I've learned and who I am translates well into being effective in our community. It's been a wild ride. I'm going to start with a reading. This is a great book called Earth Prayers, and it was given to me by one of the women who got arrested with me. And during our first arrest, we had 23 people get arrested at our first action. I have some pictures from it. And we spent the night in prison together because they tried to make the process be the punishment, because they knew they would just charge us with trespassing, misdemeanor 1. And so we ended up spending the night in prison together, 13 of us in one room. Yes, we spooned, but before the end of the night, it was like a teenage sleepover party for the 13 women. Men, we don't know, they were somewhere else. But Betsy DeLisle gave me this, and I want to read a poem from it. Wherever you are is home, and the earth is paradise. Wherever you set your feet is holy land. You don't live off it like a parasite. You live in it, and it in you. Or you don't survive. And that is the only worship of God there is. So my father died of cancer in 2005, December. And the house that I grew up in southern Lancaster County, on this little plot of land that's 8 acres of woods along the Tuckawan Creek, surrounded now by Lancaster County Conservancy property, which will never be developed, was going to go up for sale. So if my husband and I didn't buy it, it would be out of the family. And we built the house when I was a kid. My sister and I picked all the rocks out of the creek. The outside of it is all stone. My dad did all the masonry work. We tore a barn down in York County for the beams that hold up the ceiling that's as high as this and the whole wall of windows in the front. And so my husband and I moved from the Lehigh Valley, where we had jobs. We quit our jobs. We sold our home. We bought the family home, and we came back to Lancaster without jobs. And we lived there for 2 years before my husband actually found the job that he wanted of his dreams at Montclair State University. He's a professor of religion. Native American Studies is his area of study and research. And he commutes a couple of days a week. Well, fast forward a few years, I worked as youth director, I raised kids, I took care of the house. But I was home a lot, enjoying the space that we had. And in March of 2014, we had to knock on the door, you know, that proverbial knock on the door from a surveyor saying, we need your permission, sign this form, we're putting a natural gas pipeline through your backyard. And my backyard is all woods. And they would have cut our trees down. And I was like, what are you talking about? Like, no, you're not. We're not going to give you permission to do that. And he said, well, we'll take it anyway and do it. And that was beginning of me understanding the process of how the system works and how the system is set up to privilege large corporations to exploit we the people for their own benefit. I didn't believe it then. I'm a white woman. They're all white people in this room. We're privileged in our culture. It takes us a lot longer to understand the system doesn't benefit us. Most of my people, friends of color, say, finally, Melinda, you get it. It took me a little bit longer, but I understand now and I can't sit by and allow it to happen. So, what do we have? I have pictures, and I don't know what all you want to know. I'll go through some details quickly. We've learned a lot in the past 4.5 years. We started organizing. We've done actions every couple of weeks for the past year. We have trials coming up. We've paid thousands, tens of thousands of dollars in fines for the people who have gotten arrested. We've paid tens of thousands of dollars to lawyers because we sued the DEP and we sued, well, that suit isn't finished, but we sued FERC and Williams. And, you know, we've tried everything. And one of the things that's really important to me to impress on communities who are just beginning to face this threat of a pipeline is you need to know how the system works, and you need to not believe the industry because they will lie to you and they will exploit you. And you need to organize and come together as a community in numbers if you want to make a difference. It's not just about electing a person and getting the right person in office, because the system is messed up. Even the right people in office will have their hands tied and may not be able to help you. I really have come to believe there has to be a groundswell of people who come up and rise in the streets like we did for the civil rights movement, like we did for women's right to vote. There has to be a moral crisis that affects those in power. So they say we have to make a change in how we're doing what we're doing, or we're gonna lose power. So let's start at the beginning. The ASP, the Atlantic Sunrise Pipeline. Here's a picture of it. And this is what the part of the ASP that was supposed to come through my backyard, right down around here. And the blue is an already existing Transco line. So we argued that this is a shortcut, right? It's not necessary. They already have a right-of-way where they want the gas to go. From the Marcellus Shale region up here, all the blue lines take it down here to, well, here where it's going to be exported when Cove Point's up and running, but it's already being exported through this line. This is the Transco line that had been taking natural gas from the Gulf up to New York State. Now they made it bidirectional. They're taking gas that's being fracked down this line they already have, and it's being transported and exported as we speak. This is the line that's going to give them the opportunity to send a lot more gas faster for export. And this is the line, it's a 42-inch transmission line. There is no tapping into it through here whatsoever. There's no one in Pennsylvania who's going to benefit from this gas. It's all contracted to go to Japan and India. Questions, sir?
What's that spur of North Carolina?
What is this? I have no idea. I don't know if this just goes out to a power plant. There are a couple of places like that where there are power plants that are now use energy through natural gas. But that's a good question. No one's asked that before. And now I'm curious. I'm gonna have to figure that out. It's about 180 miles, 188 miles through Pennsylvania. About 3 months after they first proposed, Williams Company first proposed this pipeline, they met behind closed doors with the Lancaster County Conservancy, who neighbor my property. They sit adjacent to our property. When they came out of the meeting, the pipeline was moved off of the Lancaster County Conservancy's property, and the Lancaster County Conservancy would not come out publicly speaking against the pipeline. They did privately, and they spoke out about how pipelines should not go on public land. And I said, no, wait a minute. The forest that is your property is the same forest that's my property. Why is it okay for it to go through mine and not yours? But it was taken off my property, so we do not have a pipeline in our land, on our land. My husband and I don't. but it comes to my community. And nothing's changed in our commitment to fighting and trying to stop it, because I have this issue with NIMBY that, yes, I'm NIMBY. I don't want it in my backyard. And we're a grassroots organization, so we work to keep it out of our backyard. And I want you to work to keep it out of your backyard, because I don't want it in your backyard either, but I can't fight everybody's backyard. So if we rise as communities to fight our own backyards, protect our own backyards, there will be an uprising of resistance. But I can't be the one, Cristi can't be the one who comes to each of your communities and fights in your backyard, but we can help organize you and give you tools to do that. So this is the sunrise. You know fracking, is that correct?
Yes.
So we don't need to go into the details of fracking. But I do have to say that this pipeline brought to our community's awareness what fracking is. We don't have fracking in Lancaster County. I didn't know. I knew there was fracking somewhere on that bag, kind of like, you know, people are starving in the world. You know, like you know that it's bad and you want to do something about it, but it didn't come home to me and I didn't realize how systemic the problem was and the issues that come from fracking were, and how they did affect more people than I realized. So one of the things that, we started by saying we don't want this pipeline in our backyard, and then our community gathered together. After the knock on our door, we called a town hall meeting. We had 350 people come out and we started organizing. And that was April 12th of 2014. And I gotta say, almost every week since then, we've had meetings, at least once a week. We've had 20 people at our house for dinner on a weekly basis. We've had 40 people at our house for meetings. We've had 5 people twice a week since we've been doing actions, coming together every night, twice a week for dinner and planning and organizing. So it's consumed our lives. And it's certainly not for the faint-hearted. But it also has helped us build a community that we didn't have before. I live in the southern end of Lancaster County where my neighbors fly Confederate flags. And I don't know about you, but that's offensive to me. But that's the community I live in. They're you know, touting a God-fearing, gun-toting, patriotic mentality that has a bravado, but doesn't follow through with the reality of what that means in a lot of ways. And it's hard for me to be there. There are a lot of my neighbors who don't adhere to the same political views that I do. But they're people I grew up with and knew me since I was a kid. And I love them to death. And if I needed anything, they'd be at my door in a minute. And so one of the things that we realized in calling the community together to stand against this Goliath was that we have more in common than we realized. And it made some people question what their values are. Now, wait a minute, I'm Republican. Republicans support infrastructure, but this is my property. And how can they take my property through eminent domain? Because I really stand on property rights. So people have had to grapple with what they believe and what the political party is saying to them in a good way, I think, throughout the process. I'm going to ask you to give me times, like how long I have. I want to give you just some ideas about where we started with our organizing and why we thought that this pipeline was a bad idea. So you know what's wrong with fracking. These are some pictures of a pipeline that was put in. They were clearing. It was called the Rock Springs, and it went through southern Lancaster County, and it was taking natural gas from the Transco line that already exists just south of our home, about 8 miles south of us, to a power plant that was being converted to natural gas rather than coal. And we just wanted to see what's it look like when they put a pipeline in. So we went down and took a bunch of pictures. And we realized that there were some major things that concerned us, particularly about the geography of Lancaster County. So we were concerned about the impact on the water bodies. So we found out that the Atlantic Sunrise Pipeline in that stretch of Greenfield line, not already existing right of way, 180 some miles through from north to south through Pennsylvania, was going to cross 388 water bodies. And it was going to cross 250 wetlands. And 44 interior forests that were going to be permanently bisected. 3,700 acres of land was going to be directly impacted by this pipeline. And Lancaster County already has been noted nationally for having some of the worst air quality in the country, 16th in the country, worst air quality. Part of it is all over the farming, part of it is all of the factory farms and the industry. We have a combination of all of it. And so the construction of this pipeline was going to put the number of particulars in the air beyond what's federally acceptable. And I'll tell you in a little bit how Williams got around that. So we were concerned about the environmental impacts. We care about our environment, and I think everyone does in some way, but we live in the woods, you know? We live close to the earth. I grew up valuing the life around me. Like my first job when I was 12 years old was picking tomatoes on our neighbor's farm. And I got 10 cents a bushel. And that was like the shit. I was like, that was great. I was excited. And I remember my dad was a hunter. We ate deer and we brought the picnic table in our basement and cut the deer up and froze it ourselves. And I would like cry for the first half hour until I got used to what we were doing because I've been a pacifist my whole life, my poor dad. Probably glad I wasn't male, he would have broken his heart. But I watched my dad run down to the creek and kick the neighbor's dogs off of a baby fawn because they were drowning it in the creek so he could save the life of this deer that he probably would be shooting and eating in a couple of years. But it's different. It's a value of life that you eat to, you can kill to eat, but you don't kill just for the sake of killing. And it's a value of the earth that my dad always said, you know, I mean, he's that German, he is dead now, but he was that German, hardworking, up when the sun rose, go to bed when the sun sets, and while the sun's up, you're working the whole time. Like if you're still in bed at 6 o'clock in the morning, you are lazy. And I grew up with that, and I hope that I don't instill that in my children too much. But that mentality of valuing the earth around you, I think is a beautiful thing. And so even though he wasn't religious, and I'm kind of glad he didn't teach me false doctrines that I had to clear out of my head as a child, he did teach me a deep spirituality of the earth that I think you all know this, are getting away from, I think, in our culture. So 10 minutes to go. The environmental impacts to preserve farmland. I don't know if you know this, but again, Lancaster County has more preserved farmland than in any other county in the nation, as well as more factory farms for pigs and for dairy and for chickens, I think. In Pennsylvania, we are at the top of the list for a lot of things. Some I'm proud of, some I'm not so proud of. But my father was one of the first people to preserve a farm with the Lancaster Farmland Trust in 1985. And so it's been a part of my growing up that you value land and you preserve the farmland. And the Atlantic Sunrise Pipeline had the legal right to go through preserved farms, to violate the lease of the landowners that they made in good faith to preserve their land, changing the lease now that it's commercial, which meant it will change the insurance that they have, it will change a lot of things for them. And farmers had no say in it, they could not control that. We were concerned about the Native American sites that it goes through. Conestoga Township in Lancaster County has a lot of Native American burial sites and sacred sites, and the line of the pipeline went right through them. Right now it's going right through them, and that's absolutely permissible. They would go around white cemeteries, but not burial grounds for Native American Indians. They would just have to, if they excavated anything, they'd have to put it in a museum. So that violation and disrespect astounded me. Our Amish neighbors. So I talked to so many of my Amish neighbors who said, no. I talked with the Williams representatives, and they came out and they explained to me eminent domain. They'll take my land through eminent domain if I don't sign on with them, and that means I'll get no money, and they'll still use my land. And I was like, no, that's not what eminent domain means. And I'm a woman, we should have sent men out, but they were like, but this is what they do. They know what they're talking about, they're the professionals. And so they signed on, so they were just outright lied to. And I was outraged, I was like, why would you lie? Like, I was so naive. I hope you're not as naive as I was. I mean, I'm almost 50 years old, and I was like, how did I get to this age? And I still think that people in business are good-hearted and care about ethical things that I care about. Because I found out that that's not always the case. And I can't presume that it is anymore, especially with the fossil fuel industry. So what we did was we decided that we were going to stop this pipeline. And we decided that we were going to try a couple of different ways of doing that. One was to try and pass a community bill of rights in our township that would say fossil fuel industry isn't allowed to come through our township. And our supervisor said, absolutely not. Our solicitor, our township lawyer said, we'll get sued, we'll go bankrupt, and the pipeline will come through because of what? Preemption. So the pipeline is crossing states, so it is a federal issue. So our supervisor said, we're preempted by the state. Our hands are tied. If the state says we need to do something, we need to do it. We went to our state representatives. Our state representative said, we're preempted by the federal government. If they say we have to do something, we have to do it. Our hands are tied. There's nothing we can do about this pipeline. So we went to our federal representative, our Congressman Joe Pitts, who said, I have nothing to do with this pipeline. It's a regulatory issue because FERC is the one who permits. The Federal Energy Regulatory Commission is the one who permits pipelines that go through more than one state. So we don't have anything to do with this, although he sat on a congressional committee that oversaw the rules of FERC. But he also was personally calling landowners to try and convince them to sign on because this pipeline was going to be good for us and would help us get back at Russia, was the language that he used. His chief of staff sent my husband and me hate mail, personal hate mail, that we've kept. Like, what are you going to do about it? It's nothing against the law for him to do that. But
When you got the knock on your door, had they already applied for permits?
they had done pre-application. Yes, they had pre-applied for, yeah. So we realized that we can't pass a Bill of Rights that protects our community. What we wanted to do was say that, this at the bottom, I think is really important. Where am I? All residents of Murray Township, along with natural communities and ecosystems within the township, possess the right to clean air, water, soil, and a natural climate, and that right shall include the right to be free from any activities which may pose potential risks to the air, water, soil, and climate within the township, including but not limited to the construction, siting, or operation of unsustainable energy systems. That's the law we tried to pass. And our township lawyer said, this is not legal for you to pass. And what it comes down to, for us in Pennsylvania and you in Maryland, it is not legal for your local communities to pass laws for a sustainable future. Why? Because it violates right now the Natural Gas Act. And the Natural Gas Act trumps any local community law.
Why were we successful in banning fracking?
That came from a different level and it's only within your state. So you can ban fracking, but you can't keep a pipeline from coming through
If
that
it's
goes across
interstate.
states that FERC would regulate. Regulatory agencies have the right, and do you know FERC has never denied a pipeline. Some pipeline applications have been withdrawn because the money wasn't there to do them. But if an industry wants to put a pipeline anywhere in the country that goes across states, they put a line on the map, they submit it to FERC, and if all their T's are crossed and I's are dotted, FERC gives them permission to do it. The fossil fuel industry can do whatever the hell they want to do. There is no regulation. Right now, the Constitution pipeline has been stopped, which was also Williams pipeline. That was going from Pennsylvania, the Marcellus Shale region, up to New York State because the New York State, Pennsylvania, it's the DEP, the Department of Environmental Protection. What is it in Maryland?
Maryland Department of Environment.
Permits, and in New York, I don't know what it is. It's the equivalents. They refuse to give the water quality permit that's required. And a judge at appeal upheld their decision to be able to do that. So the Constitution pipeline has been stopped from going into New York State. Williams, however, has already felled trees in Pennsylvania up to the border, and mostly on the homes, properties of people whose land they took through eminent domain who were resisting the pipeline. So those trees have been cut down in northern Pennsylvania for where the Constitution pipeline would go if they had gotten their permits in New York. And a judge just this week upheld the decision that the New York State has the right to say no and not permit, not give those water quality, it's the 401 water quality permit that is required. So they're in limbo. Williams is saying they're going to submit an application again to try and challenge it. But right now, all that damage has been done to one family in particular, the Halloran family that we're friends with, had a maple syrup business, and they cut down over 600 of their maple syrup trees. And they're just laying on the ground, and the pipeline's not going in and probably won't. And they have not been given any compensation for it yet. So that kind of behavior on the part of the industry makes me feel, and has brought to my attention, the injustice in the system. So a lot of people say our system's broken, and I say, no, the system's working exactly the way it's set out to work. Our elected officials have passed laws to privilege large corporations to violate and exploit the rest of the people. Right now, over half of our elected officials are millionaires. How many of you in this room are millionaires? How many of you are making $1 million? Is it half of us, you think? Do our elected officials represent us? And do they have our best interest in mind? No. So I think that what we need to do is not just nonviolent civil disobedience, which is where we got to. How many of you know anything about Lancaster County's pipelines? Only a couple of you. So I'm making assumptions that you know more than you do. So what we did, I only have a couple of minutes. I'll give you, we did this quilt. This is a really cool thing. So this quilt has 10 panels. There are 5 squares across and 5 squares down, so 25 squares per panel. And we have 10 of them. So it's 50 feet wide, which is the width of the permanent right-of-way of the Atlantic Sunrise Pipeline. So it's 50 feet. And each quilt square, 12 by 12 inches, was submitted by someone who said, this is my statement of resistance to the Atlantic Sunrise Pipeline. And then we had quilters who put them together, because what's more Lancaster County than a quilt? Right. And we decided that what we needed to do was something beautiful. Our resistance was going to be coming out of our community. We're going to be happy, we're going to be positive, we're going to be nonviolent. We're going to resist, we're going to speak out, and we're going to do it with joy, because that's who we are as a community. So we challenged. We went to meetings. We came up with, this is us suing the DEP. We built a stand. This is, the stand was a symbol of our resistance right in the location where they were going to drill under the Conestoga River. And this property, the landowners were resistant. They didn't want the pipeline to go in. This was our dedication of the stand. We had over 250 people come out for the dedication. I have 3 minutes. And the landowners, after resisting and resisting at the last minute, after all of the permits had been given from FERC, the landowners sold the land out from under us. They bought it 10 years before for $200,000. They sold it for $3 million to Williams, because Williams didn't want us to have our resistance in this location. So they paid $3 million to get us off of this property, which it did. The only thing is, I don't think Williams realized that our movement was about a community standing up, not about a specific plot of land. And so we had been training for nonviolent civil disobedience. We had 1,000 people sign a pledge, and the pledge said a lot about, I'm going to grab it because I think it's important to read. This was a couple years ago when we wrote it, and we had 1,000 people who signed it and said, we stand with you. We as local communities have an inherent right and duty to, number 1, protect the land, water, and air that gives us life, and number 2, ensure the health and safety of our residents. For 3 years, we've opposed Williams' plans to run a dangerous fracked gas export pipeline through the heart of our communities, using every legal means available to us. Yet our system of government at all levels has failed to protect us. As 2017 begins, our resolve is stronger than ever to protect ourselves and this land by ensuring the Atlantic Sunrise Project never gets built. Together, we defy a system of government that tells us that we can't protect ourselves from industrial harms because corporations have been given more rights than we who live here. We defy the gas industry's plans to subject our families, our communities, and natural environment to catastrophic danger for their own corporate profit. We defy FERC's conclusion that the Atlantic Sunrise Project would have less than significant impacts on our land, water, and communities. And together we pledge to protect our water. We pledge to protect and preserve our preserved farms. We pledge to protect our forests and precious wildlife. We pledge to protect our sacred Native American heritage and culture. We pledge to protect our Amish neighbors who have been targeted and harassed. We pledge to protect the future of our children who must live with the consequences of the actions or inaction that we take today. We vow to protect our communities through nonviolent civil disobedience. If FERC gives Williams Gas Company permission to poison our water, clear-cut our forests, steal our farms, bulldoze our Native American heritage, and put our families at risk. Along with our financial and material resources, we pledge to put our bodies between the land we love and those seeking to destroy it. Since October 2017, last year, we had over 50, almost 60 people arrested and charged with, usually misdemeanor. My 14-year-old, my 15-year-old were arrested, locked down equipment. When we went to probation, so the probation officer, to see what the repercussions would be, they spent 4 hours talking with us about how we parent, and the probation officer sent us home and said the system is for families who need it, your family doesn't need it, and there were no repercussions for our children for their arrests. We worked with the sisters, the Adorers of the Blood of Christ, to have the property coming through their property. They sued FERC and Williams for violating their religious freedom, and a judge just decided yesterday that they don't have the right to even have their case heard in court because they didn't file with FERC any letter or documentation that said they thought their religious freedoms were being violated. And because that wasn't submitted to FERC, a judge just decided that they have no right to even claim that their constitutional religious rights have been violated. So what it comes down to, and what you need to understand is, the Natural Gas Act trumps the constitutional rights of human beings. That's the power that the industry has, and that's what we're up against. And it's not just the fossil fuel industry, it's large corporations in general in America. And I really believe that unless we're willing to fight against them in large numbers, they're going to rule us for a long time and exploit what matters most to us. And I could say 100 more things, and I probably have to go. This was FERC's decision that there's no impact to the environment. We had people come together and burned it. 2,000 pages from FERC saying there's no environmental impact that's significant from this pipeline. So we just had a cathartic meeting, signing our pledge, our nonviolent direct actions. This is a picture of the chapel on the sisters' property that we built. It's become a pilgrimage for a lot of people. The head woman for the Sisters of the Adorers of the Blood of Christ just had a face-to-face audience with the Pope, where a document my husband and I created was submitted to him on behalf of us and the sisters, saying, will you please speak out against this? That just happened last week. We're still waiting for him and hope that he speaks out against it. And you can go visit it. We've given a baptism there, and there's a couple getting married there in a couple of weeks. And this is the aerial picture of the chapel and the pipeline being put in. Just one more thing. Once Williams received all of their permits, 189 miles of pipeline that they're putting in, they went right to the sisters' property in the middle, and they put the pipeline in there before anywhere else. And that was the day that 23 of us got arrested, the first action that we did. And this is us. They took this bulldozer off, and we had 100 people who walked out on the site. The police gave us some time. We sang songs. They said, we're going to arrest you if you don't move. Some people got off the right of way, and the rest of us stayed and got arrested. That's my 16-year-old who was arrested that day. This is a Catholic priest who was arrested there. Barbara Van Horn was arrested. All of these are friends of ours who were arrested with us. Okay, I think that's it. Thank you for your time and energy in listening.
Do you have any questions for her? Yes, question.
So let's take a couple of questions that come to mind, and then we'll go to our second speaker. So, yes.
Yes, sir.
First of all, what does FERC stand for?
The Federal Energy Regulatory Commission.
Okay, and Williams?
Williams Partners is the industry that's proposing that proposed the Atlantic Sunrise, is behind the Atlantic Sunrise. And they, Transco is an arm of Williams.
Mm-hmm.
They're based in Oklahoma.
Okay, so what is your situation right now? I mean, have you been able to stop it at
No,
all?
pipeline's in the ground. It's almost completely in the ground in Lancaster. Yeah. And we had our last action, we did, they were crossing the Pegway Creek, where they had 15 huge tubes in the creek, sucking all of the water out of it. And the tubes went down 150 yards and deposited it downstream. And in the middle, they were trenching through the creek, to the creek bed. And they had to provide portage. So we had an action where we came and we made their life a little difficult, just doing what we could do by kayaking down the creek and going around it. One day we kept them from working all day, and then the second time we actually, my husband got up on equipment and with some of the people and was arrested. But it's still going in. And just, I want to say that we don't continue to do actions because we think we're going to stop this pipeline at this point. The pipeline being put in the ground is still wrong. It's still unjust, it's unnecessary, it's a violation. So our actions are calling attention to that we've decided that we're going to continue to do the right thing to enforce what the law should be, or at least from our community standpoint. We're naming what's wrong in the system, even though it's happening around us. Yeah, yes, sir.
I wonder if there were any, if there, in the lessons learned category, would, on reflection, looking back,
Sure.
if you had gone to FERC and had your, your hotshot attorneys lined up
Right.
at the beginning,
Mhm.
do you think that would have made a difference?
No. We had over 6,000 comments submitted for this project. Why we're against it? 97% of them were against it. They still permitted it. It doesn't matter. The industry has all the power. When it comes to the regulatory agency.
Because who sits on the FERC commission?
Well, there are usually 5 commissioners. They're appointed by the president.
I know.
And they go in and out of the industry all the time. Right. Question in the back, yeah.
How, again, I know we're focused in Pennsylvania, but how has New York been able to hold it back with the water permitting and that
They-
wasn't an option?
They just didn't issue the water permit, which is crazy. What's happening in Pennsylvania is very different because we have a lot of fracking here. And so the industry has come to own the DEP. Yeah, the DEP is owned by the industry. So what the DEP did for the air quality and the water quality permits, the Department of Environmental Protection. So they have to, it is a state agency, yeah. And they have to issue permits in order for the construction to happen. So the air quality was going to be beyond what is federally permissible. So the DEP proactively went to Williams and said, we have a community in Maryland that doesn't meet their standards of violating their air quality that's over 100 miles away. You can buy credits, Williams, from that community in Maryland. Just pay us a certain amount of money and then you can go on with your construction. And that's what they did. And that's how they issued the air quality permit. And we made a stink about that. We went to the meetings, we stood up and turned our backs. Like everything we've done is nonviolent, is respectful, but we make a voice of resistance.
No, they did the same thing for Cove Point in
Yes.
Maryland.
Yep. And then the
Air quality
DEP,
credits by
that's
law,
right.
Credits in Frederick.
The Department of Environmental Protection also issued the water quality permit, the one that New York would not issue, before Williams even submitted how they were going to cross the water bodies. So it wasn't even, show us how you're going to destroy our water and we'll decide whether it's okay or not. It was like, oh, you can just destroy them however you want. We'll work out the details later. So they issued the permit, and that's why we sued the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection. And 3 years later, they still haven't decided what court's going to hear our suit. Over $50,000 we've raised and paid our lawyers for that suit, and it still hasn't even been heard in the pipelines in the ground.
Okay, one more question,
Yeah.
and we can get Malinda back at the end, but, yeah.
Of the 188 miles, how many have been finished with pipeline?
I don't know that exactly, to tell you the truth. I know that they've been working all along it, and there are different levels of completion. They are almost completely done in Lancaster County, but there are 4 other counties that they're working on. They are expected to have it finished by the end of the summer and have gas flowing through it by the fall. But they did plan on having gas flowing through it by 2016. So we have delayed them, and we've brought much more attention to what's happening to communities all across the country through violation of the rights of communities and the rights of people for the sake and privilege of large corporations. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you all. Okay, now we have Tracy Cannon, and Tracy's from the Eastern Panhandle Protectors of West Virginia.
And I love that you have someone from Maryland, West Virginia, and PA, because this is a systemic problem throughout the nation. It's not just one of us dealing with this. A lot of communities.
Cool.
Hello.
Hello.
Melinda is a hard act to follow. And I want to say that the pipeline being built in Pennsylvania, the Atlantic Sunrise Pipeline, is actually a much larger pipeline than what they're now constructing in my part of West Virginia. However, the same issues come up. Landowners get the knock on the door, landowners get manipulated, bullied. People like your Amish friends get told, if you don't sign with us, we're going to take your land anyway, and you'll get no money. These businesses lie to people, and they are absolutely unscrupulous. I've seen it. I've talked to the people. That's how it is. The pipeline they want to build in the Eastern Panhandle, unfortunately, I did not think ahead and bring a map, which would have been handy. But I'm not sure if anyone knows where Berkeley Springs, West Virginia is.
Yeah.
The pipeline would come from Pennsylvania.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I know. No,
It's hard to get hold.
it's not, there's gas pipelines in Virginia that have come from West Virginia, and we're sorry about that. They want to build the pipeline from Pennsylvania through Maryland, under the Potomac River, and over to Charlestown, West Virginia, or the neighborhood of Charlestown, West Virginia. And they're also, what I could say about pipelines in general is at this time, the gas industry is trying to build as many pipelines as they possibly can before people like us stop them. There's pipelines like the Atlantic Coast Pipeline, the Mountain Valley Pipeline. I'm not sure if people have heard of that. The so-called Atlantic Coast Pipeline. And in West Virginia, there are numerous pipelines. If you can picture West Virginia's northern panhandle, I'd make the symbol, but it's obscene. If you go there, just below West Virginia's northern panhandle is an area, about 6 counties in northwestern West Virginia are what they call the sweet spot. And that's where a lot of these pipelines are originating. The Atlantic Coast Pipeline and the Mountain Valley Pipeline both originate from there. There's another one called the Leach Express, the Rover Pipeline, and the Mountaineer Express Pipeline. All those pipelines originate in that area where they're doing a lot of fracking. And now that's not 100% relevant to the pipeline being built in the Eastern Panhandle, but it is relevant to the issue of pipelines in general, because they want to get that gas while they still can and make that money. And they're trying to find more markets and more people who will use the gas. And that's where Jefferson County, West Virginia comes in. They're currently, we did not know this until about 2 weeks ago, but they're currently putting in Jefferson County, West Virginia, which is to the west, maybe 20 or 30 miles to the west of Frederick, Maryland. They're putting in a facility called Rockwool, where they will take basalt rock and coal slag, which is the byproduct of coal mining, melt that down into liquid using high heat from burning gas and coal. They'll melt that down into a liquid and spin it like so much cotton candy into insulation and sell that. And we've just come to find out in the past few weeks, concerned citizens in the area around Jefferson County, West Virginia, have found out that there's 6 cancer-causing substances that will be sent out of the smokestacks. And we're astounded, and everyone's hair is on fire, but as it always seems to happen, this project has gone in secret, under the radar. Nobody knew about it. There was some tiny little ad printed in the newspaper saying there's a public comment period coming up. And now everyone's saying, oh, it's a done deal. And oh, and it needs the gas pipeline too. And the gas pipeline, well, that's a done deal as well. Well, we're still fighting it. And yeah, a year ago this month, we held an event called, we spoke to a community organization in Shepherdstown, and the Development Authority president was there to speak on behalf of the Development Authority, which was putting through in the pipeline, which wanted the pipeline. And we asked them, what sort of industry, you don't have to tell us the name of the company or anything, what sort of industry do you need this natural gas for? And they wouldn't say it. Well, it's this Rockwool facility, which is actually a company owned, it's a Danish company. And we have a pattern in our area also of companies coming in from other countries or other areas taking advantage of West Virginia's lax environmental laws. So anyway, to the pipeline. About 2 years ago, around the summer of 2016, that's when people in our area started getting the knock on the door. And gas company representatives coming to them and asking them to sign an easement agreement, just like Malinda had. A lot of them were threatened and bullied, and between July and September of 2016, half of those people, half of the 120 parties along the 23-mile pipeline had already signed an agreement. A small group of us, let's see, an activist friend of mine named Russell Moe-Kyber's wife went to church with several people whose property the gas company had approached. She went back to her husband and said, Russell, we got to do something about this. And we got a group together with those landowners, those original landowners. And let's see, you're gonna have, if this doesn't work, you're gonna have to help me. Okay. And as a group, we started protesting. And then winter came. And it was cold. And we wanted to canvass, but it got dark at 5 o'clock at night. So we missed another window of time during the whole winter. And by that time, at least 85% had signed.
The pressure is amazing that the industry puts on landowners.
Oh gosh, they went to people's houses and bullied them relentlessly.
50 calls a day. Yeah.
They went to one woman's work.
Wow.
They go to your work, they come to your house. They stand there when you're trying to put your kids in the car to take them to a sports event and badger you. And say, oh, so just sign this and I'll leave. Anyway, we started canvassing. We canvassed for a little while. And then we ended up going down the path of holding events. And we didn't have quite enough people to canvass, and I think that was a problem. Your movement seems like it's been very landowner based. No?
We don't have any landowners in our movement right now, except for the sisters.
Okay.
Everyone
Well,
else is in the community.
has sold. Okay, well, there you go.
They signed, yeah, landowners signed.
And the sad thing is that once people have signed, it's final. And they have to start viewing it in their own minds as something that was inevitable and that they couldn't help.
Right.
You know, since they, psychologically speaking, once they've signed, they have to essentially be on the gas company side, and they really can't fight it in public.
And they're legally limited. They often sign a gag rule. Like
Sometimes that happens with some people on the Maryland side, but I don't know anyone in West Virginia who's had to sign a gag order,
Yeah.
but they gag themselves.
Right.
In a manner of speaking, it's the embarrassment, really. You know, they've signed something they shouldn't have signed and that they wish they hadn't signed, but there's nothing they can do about it now. So they have to just tell themselves, this is how it is. Of course it was always inevitable, and of course I had to sign, and so it is. Anyway, we had protests. And this one took place in Hancock, Maryland. Hancock, Maryland is where, 20 minutes, okay. Hancock, Maryland is where the pipeline is crossing underneath the Potomac River. They're not actually doing that yet. But the FERC has now, Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, has now approved that. So it could start any time. And this was a meeting we had all the way I'll skip all the way to April 30th of 2017. We had a meeting at the spot where the pipeline is going to cross the Potomac. It's actually when they go under these rivers, let's say your river's here, they have to start from far back to go under it. So several properties will actually just have the pipeline deep underground under them. So just so you're aware, they do what they call hydraulic directional drilling, and it goes under the river that way. And it's not like they don't have to dam up a river, they just go deep underground under it. which could be a problem in our region due to something called karst geology, which is limestone under the ground. Limestone can have, it can lead to a lot of holes in the ground because lime gets eaten away by water. So groundwater actually eats the rock out. So there can be huge gaps under the ground. And if the pipeline's going under the river, but there's a gap, like a hole underneath of where the line is, and there's a joint over top of that hole, it can break because it doesn't have any support. And then the two ends of the weld, they can rub together, and that creates the spark. And the next thing you know, that's a pipeline explosion. So we don't know for a fact that pipeline explosions have been caused by that particular factor, but it certainly is a risk factor that we're pointing to.
In this geography. In this geography.
In that geography, and you have that problem too, sinkholes, right? Yep. So anyway, you know, I don't think we have these in the right order.
Sorry.
Oh, no, maybe we do. At some point, we also went to the different county commissions, and we're still on that. We're in Jefferson County now, which is the county that's furthest down the pipeline route. This nice woman right here, that's my friend Patricia Kiesecker, and even though she'd never done so before in her whole life, she stood there and faced those county commissioners who were completely hostile to her and gave them a piece of her mind.
Good for her.
So way to go, Patricia. And I think she'll come to the next county commissioners meeting and do the same thing, even if it's not her county. On August 11th of last year, we had a paddle against the Potomac event. That person, somewhere in there is Cristi.
I think I'm in the yellow kayak.
And yeah, a lot of these events were designed to get the attention of Marylanders and Governor Hogan. The fact that the pipeline was going under the Potomac is something we latched onto because the governor of Maryland would have to approve that. Unfortunately, none of us really knew just quite how sold out he was to the gas industry. The gas industry had apparently been lobbying him all along, unbeknownst to us, and had been, undermining all our efforts, essentially. That was all the permits. By the time we found out about the pipeline, they actually got their Public Service Commission approval in November of 2016, 15, okay. And after that, the West Virginia portion of the pipeline could be built because they didn't need, they isolated the West Virginia portion of the pipeline and treated it as a separate pipeline. In a manner of speaking, to divide us from the Maryland side. And in the end, Governor Hogan, we called on him to stop the Potomac pipeline. In the end, he did no such thing. We were naive, in fact, to think that he ever would, honestly.
That's the industry's greatest asset, I think, our naivete.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. And we just kept showing how naive we were over and over. And thus the pipeline is being built, just like they wanted. We showed this film at two different theaters, one in Berkeley Springs and one in Shepherdstown. Pipeline Fighters, if you get a chance. Ruth Alice is the person who turned me on to this. I think I still have your copy of it.
That's okay, I made a copy.
Awesome, okay. So yeah, we showed this movie, we made a little money, a lot of it spread awareness, and the fact of the matter is it would appear, I've got it from any number of sources, that the town of Shepherdstown actually has driven off the gas pipeline. So there was a little leg of the pipeline that was supposed to go to Shepherdstown. That probably won't happen. So one tiny little victory. But if they put in the Rockwell plant and they're burning gas and they're burning coal and they're putting all this pollution into the air, all these volatile organic compounds, then I don't even know what to say about it. It's sad. It's really sad.
And the air comes this way.
And the air comes to you, and the air is coming to you all in Maryland, unfortunately. Maryland should have its hair on fire too about the rock wall plant. Just look up the words, if you want to Google it, just look up the words rock wall and Ranson, West Virginia, R-A-N-S-O-N, Ranson.
But how do you spell rock? Is it wall or?
Wool, wool like sheep's wool.
W-O-O-L.
Yep, rock wool, like sheep have wool.
And what was Brandon spelling the other one? I'm sorry, you spell it again, please?
R-A-N-S-O-N, Ranson, West Virginia.
There's your map.
Where's my map? I wish.
Search.
Oh, yeah, there's the map, of course. We're right.
You have a pointer.
And you can point with this thing. How do you do that?
The middle.
The center.
Okay, yep. That's where the pipeline's going, right there. Yeah, so anyway, we showed the movie, we got some support. We raised some awareness. At this event, this was the event, we called this event Hands Across the Potomac. And actually, the idea was thought up by someone who isn't even part of the no pipeline movement, but she contributed her 2 cents, and this is what we got. 352 people stood hand in hand on the bridge that goes across the Potomac River between Sharpsburg, Maryland, and Shepherdstown, West Virginia. I think this might have been the action that made it so that Shepherdstown is not going to get a pipeline.
I'm guessing people in this room were there. Yeah.
Yep. It was awesome. It made us all feel good. It didn't move Governor Hogan even an inch. So that's the kind of thing you learn, I guess.
When did he buy into it? I thought he was, just before he took office, before he was even sworn in, I was told that he had already, gotten on board.
Yeah, and it's possible. We don't know when, we can't read his mind, but he's on board for a lot of infrastructure in the state of Maryland, like the compressor station in Myersville, the compressor station they want to build in Charles County.
Well, they have to get this stuff to Cove Point. So they
Yeah.
have to build these compressor stations every 50 miles all the way to Cove Point to keep pushing it.
Yep, every 40 to 70 miles they need a compressor station.
He's just quiet
We
about
were
it.
asking Governor Hogan to deny the 401 water certification, like the governor did in New York.
Exactly.
And we did not know that his Department of the Environment had already agreed that they wouldn't do a 401 certification.
Yeah, exactly. And when we found that out, Brooke called me on the phone and she was crying, so. But like I said, we were naive and foolish. Anyway, it was fun. All of a sudden, 10 minutes, thanks. I better hurry. Okay,
Yeah.
we're gonna talk about the pictures now, sorry. Okay, we tried going to their hearings, we went to their hearings, we boycotted their hearings, blah, 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 right? Oh, is that you? Yeah, I thought I turned it off. Sorry. Damn. Okay. Did no good. This was all designed to move Governor Hogan. None of it did any good. Also, the whole matter of us having sort of a one-pronged strategy, that actually was not such an awesome thing. We probably should have had more than one prong, but we only had so many people. It sounds like you had a lot of people,
And we were doing it for over almost 5 years.
right?
We started with nothing.
Yep. All right, so then we did this event, we had lit up signs, we were there at his mansion. He ignored the whole thing. That's kind of what to say. These are our key holdout people. This is Patricia, who I told you about in the previous slide, who had never spoken in public before and really has just become a whole different person. And she says I taught her how to use her mouth, but I think she taught me how to use my mouth. And that's her husband, Dean. He's 81 years old now. And he had said back in the day, before the pipeline went in, he said, "I'll be waiting for them with my shotgun." They really did not want this pipeline on there. You can see how beautiful this land is. Let me see if I can find another. I think it's a different set of slides. Anyway, they fought it, and it is actually in the ground on their property as we speak, sadly enough. This is from, this should be, yep. And this is a picnic when, right as the pipeline was being built on their property, we had a big party. And the gas company, of all things, they had a Jiffy John parked on the easement. And the day before our party, they took it away. And the day after it, they put it back. So, that's how they are.
Oh, that's pretty funny, actually.
I hope you just went out and peed on their easement.
We did. We actually built a big, I don't have a picture of that either, but we built a mandala with branches and stuff on the easement. And then we also took that away after the party. So anyway, these people here, I studied this. I know how much every single person got for their sacrifice. Person who lives here, they got,
Here's your pointer.
use the pointer, right, sorry, I'm learning. This house right here, they got $2,500.
Oh my God.
This house right here, they got $1,800. There's another house right there, right beside that one, they only got $500. The line goes from up on the hill here, that's called Potato Hill. It comes down the hill, turns around, and goes in front of the house that's right over there. They got $500. The distance between this point and this point is 70 feet. So that's how close to those people's homes that is. An explosion of a pipeline in Oklahoma in 2013, it was a 12-inch pipeline. This is a 10-inch pipeline they're putting in. That pipeline made a crater that was 30 feet wide when it exploded and 20 feet deep. So just imagine what would happen to these people if they were sleeping one night and the pipeline blew up. There we go. Flooding. While they were building the pipeline, there was a huge flood. And it looked a lot like this. The barrier, the rocks rolled down, the pipeline, you can see the flags right, oops, sorry. You can see the flags up here. The pipeline route goes right along here on this little hill here. And this crappy little barrier here, this lousy little thing, is supposed to hold the dirt earth up there and keep it from flowing into this little stream right here. Not so much, right? Actually, I wanted to show something different first, but whatever. This is where they're doing what they call hydraulic directional drilling under a stream called Sleepy Creek. It's 5 minutes. Okay, we'll hurry. That's what it looked like during the flood. And another thing is they also have not gotten under Sleepy Creek yet because they've run into huge rocks that they can't drill through, and they've broken 4 bits.
Good.
So I'm like, yeah. Anyway, moving on. This is hydraulic directional drilling from a little more of a distance.
Did you take these?
Yeah, I took all of them, yeah. I've been trespassing the whole time.
Good for you.
The whole time they've been building this, people have been telling me, oh, you shouldn't trespass, you might get arrested. I'm like, well, how am I supposed to get a good picture? The workers could be there and I'm standing at the edge of the woods taking pictures of them and they don't even see me. So.
They don't cite you at all? You haven't had any citations?
I had one person a couple of people angrily run me off.
Right.
But I just get in my car and go home and go on to the next spot.
I think Tracy blends in well.
Yeah.
It's my camouflage.
It really.
This is that same site. This man, whose property this flood is happening on and where the rocks were tumbling over the barrier, he was blind and in a wheelchair and in a nursing home when he signed the agreement.
Oh, wow.
His name is Dr. Koulis. He was my chiropractor. And he was, I really need to investigate whether whether he signed that, whether someone read that to him or gave him a Braille copy because he was blind. Anyway, they rip off old people, they rip off blind people. They do what they have to do. They are all about the money. Never trust them. And of course there's no way to learn but the hard way. This is more flooding. The lousy little barriers do nothing. The water just runs right underneath them. Yeah, the barriers are pretty worthless. And we appealed to the DEP. We put in an appeal with the West Virginia Department of the Environment. We had all our evidence. We had hundreds of photographs. They ignored the whole thing. That's how it works. This is a wetland, like right over, let's see here, that's a wetland. This is the pipeline route. That's what it looked like. This is on the Keysuckers property. More destruction. The pipelines go up and down the steepest hills. And that's what they do. They go 3 minutes, they go up and down. And that's where your land subsidence can come in. The land, you know, the land subsides around the pipeline, and it can actually cause the pipeline to rupture. The pipeline that blew up near Moundsville, West Virginia on June 7th. Some people may or may not have heard about that. It was a pretty big fireball. It was on a brand new pipeline, and land subsidence had supposedly caused that. Anyway, I'm just going to show you all some pictures. We only have a few minutes left, so we're going through the pictures. That's how great the barriers work. I was standing in water up to about here, taking this picture. I had boots, yeah.
Were there any fines because of these pictures? Did you
No.
submit these and no fines
No
were?
fines, no nothing, just, oh, well.
And if a farmer tried to do this, they'd be fined in a second.
Right. So you said you took them to DEP and they just like turned
What
out-
would be the merit or the West Virginia? What is your?
DEP.
Oh, it's DEP.
They just turned a blind eye, I mean.
They just said, oh, they've gone back and fixed all that, is what they said.
So is West Virginia more corrupt or is Pennsylvania more corrupt?
Hard to say, right? They both have gas, which seems to make people crooked as crap. This family here, I'll just say one last thing, just on the way people got ripped off. I guess it's not the biggest point, but it's what I'm stuck on right now. These people who had their property taken, their house is right here, right over there, you can't quite see it. He's about 80 years old and has dementia. She's a little bit younger and has been in the hospital. They have 38 acres and they got $1,450.
Oh, this makes me sick, please.
And these are just some shots on the Keysuckers property with the beautiful views and the destruction beside them.
And this is what it looks like. I mean, all across the country where they're putting pipelines in.
That's Patty with a ruler. She's making sure they dug the trench deep enough. The only concession they got from the gas company is that the pipe should be buried 5 feet deep instead of just 3 feet deep on their property. So she's out there measuring to keep them honest. More pipeline, more destruction, same old stuff, pretty view. This is all the Keysuckers land. And again, it goes down and then up. They don't go up, the hill is here. They don't go along the side of the hill. They go straight up and down and then up and down the next one. That's apparently how they have to work. Anyway. Is that the end?
Yep.
Okay, good.
And my battery's gonna die.
Oh, no.
Yeah, but it wouldn't.
Oh, thank you, Tracy. Couple questions for Tracy at this point.
Oh, no.
Anybody?
Yeah.
Isn't there some way that all these people that have been harassed and coerced into signing these things could get together in some kind of a class action suit or something? I mean, this is just so appalling.
I know, and I'm trying, the problem I have is I'd like to go to people like the elderly couple who only got $1,450. I'd like to go to them and say, look, there's other people who held out, who have the same size property as you, who got 32,000. But I don't want to, since it's fine, the agreement is binding and they can't get out of it, I don't know how to break people's hearts like that. You know, I'd have to make them aware that they were cheated first.
Right.
And I just don't know how to do that, you know. I would feel so cruel.
And if you talk to the DEP or to FERC, and say, we're concerned about the injustices against our community members with these contracts, they say, that's a private issue, you would have to hire a lawyer. Each landowner would have to hire a lawyer and sue, and we're not involved in that at all, we have nothing to do with that. That's a private contract between a company and an individual.
Yeah.
So every individual would have to hire a lawyer and sue personally. And it's really hard to prove that there were, because you signed it, you agreed to it. Whatever they brought to you, you signed.
But they were manipulated strongly.
How do you prove that? And what is manipulation, what is stronghold?
Right, exactly right. Yeah, and like I said, I don't know how to break it to those, they're such nice people.
I have another question. I mean, Larry Hogan, he's not the only political figure in Maryland. I mean, aren't there others that could basically take the other side? I mean, I think of Brian Frosch. I've been at rallies with him, particularly one of them where we were rallying against offshore drilling.
Mhm.
So I feel like he's very, very much environmentally savvy. I mean, I would hope something like that, and even maybe, since it's an election, get their opponents to actually come and support something against this somehow or another.
From what I understand, Ben Jealous
Yeah,
opposed the pipeline.
okay.
But from what I understand further, now this is just, Brooke Harper of Chesapeake Climate Action telling me, now that it's been done, Ben Jealous can't come back and change it once if he becomes governor.
Yeah.
If he defeats Hogan, he can't reverse it. I'm not sure if I answered your question, though. I apologize.
Yeah, you did. You've done. Yeah.
There was a movie that came out about 8 or 10 years ago starring Daniel Day-Lewis called There Will Be Blood. And part of the movie, he's the enforcer that goes around and talks to these people to get them to sign over their mineral rights to the oil companies.
Yeah.
Pretty rough.
The landmen are highly treacherous. That's what I can say. The so-called landmen or land agents or lease agents or whatever they call them from the pipe. They're actually a contractor hired by the pipeline builder to go out and get the land. And they're the ones that do the lying, on behalf of the gas company, I guess. Because they don't want to do it themselves, I suppose.
Okay, one more question. Go ahead.
Yeah, Judge Ellis may not be able to reverse it, but can he enact other things to stop infrastructure? Yeah, maybe not that particular, but he can counteract it with other things.
Yeah, one would hope he will do such things. I'm hoping he gets elected.
Yes.
Where's Alice?
Ruth?
Yeah, there is a no new infrastructure coalition in Maryland that has a legislative committee that's looking at proposed legislation for the legislature in January. So not just the governor, but also the legislature to get them on board. And one of the things they thought about is to have the legislature require the state to do a 401 water certification analysis for every pipeline. But that's not required now.
So Ruth, can you send contact information about that organization to Carl?
Carl was at the meeting.
Carl?
He knows about it.
Carl has it?
Yeah.
If you,
Okay, all right, great, thank you. So for our final speaker, we have Cristi Demnowicz from the No Eastern Shore Pipeline Group. Cristi.
All right, thank you all for having us. Thanks to Carl and Carolyn for organizing this event. So my name is Cristi. I know some of you that are here that came in the back, so hi guys, thanks for coming. And to everybody else, thank you for coming tonight. This event was kind of organized in a specific way to give everybody an understanding of people who have been doing this for 5 years, people who have been doing this for 2 years, what they've learned along the way, and then what we can do here in Maryland to stop this from happening here. So the whole point is that what they're going through and have been going through is possibly going to happen on the eastern shore of Maryland, potentially, and we can stop it if we, learn from them. And I've had conversations with both Malinda and Tracy, at least probably half a dozen conversations over the past couple of weeks asking them questions. What did, how did you learn this? What happened there? How did this go? What do you think you would have done differently, or what wish you had done earlier? And that's the information that I'm taking into this campaign in order to stop this pipeline. And I'll get into the pipeline in just a minute, but I want to also let everybody know that my, Malinda, especially Tracy, their kind of entry into this was as a landowner under attack. My entry into pipeline resistance is because I'm actually an anti-corruption activist. And what that means is that all the stuff that you're saying about this is corrupt and that's colluding and that's, the industry being bullies, that's the stuff that I've been working to fight for about 5 years. I started another group called Represent Maryland in 2015, which is an anti-corruption group. And the whole thing that we do is fight the overreaching influence of corporate entities and try to bring power back to average people. So to me, and that's all through legislation. We've got to change our laws to empower regular people, because right now they empower corporations. And it's not just for-profit corporations, it's also nonprofit corporations. And a lot of the think tanks that are coming up with our laws are nonprofits making laws to benefit themselves. So to me, pipeline resistance work and pipelines in general are a very specific, very real-world example of the collusion between the government, whether it's at the state or the federal level, and a corporate entity. The entities are being protected, they're getting their way, and the average people don't have an entity, they're not powerful enough to be able to fight it. And the laws have been written for the past 30 years to benefit them, not us. There's a movement to get something called a democracy amendment into the Constitution, the US Constitution, and what that would state is two things. Money is not speech, so money, you can't limit speech and therefore you can't limit money. So if we declare that money is not speech, then you can limit money. And the second one that's really important is that corporations do not inherently get the protections of the US Constitution. Right now, because it's not expressly stated in the Constitution that they don't get the protections, the assumption is that, well, they must. And since a corporation is a legal entity, just like a human is a legal entity, they're now getting protected by the Constitution. And that's where they're able to do a lot of this stuff, because they're getting more protections than an average person is. So that's a little bit of back history, how I got into this, and moving forward, how we need to look at fighting like all of these issues. It's not just pipelines, it's also the factory farms, it's also the, any of the big industries, healthcare, pharmaceuticals, where corporations are getting more.
Prison systems, education.
Yeah, exactly. It's basically any of the industrial complexes, it's because they're protected more than we are. So on to the show. Okay, so thank you guys for coming. No Eastern Shore Pipeline is a grassroots movement. It started kind of like Malinda's, a little bit differently again, simply because we, I didn't get a knock on the door. I actually live on a boat, not on land, so I never got the knock on the door. Instead, I saw an article in a newspaper about a meeting between the company that's putting this pipeline, trying to put this pipeline through, and the Eastern Shore delegation of the Maryland General Assembly. Said that they had met with them. A couple of delegates went on record saying, yeah, we want the pipeline, it's going to bring jobs, because it's always about jobs. Some others said, we're interested and we think we support it, but we need to learn more and we need to make sure it's done safely. And so I reached out to a number of different people that I had met through either Standing Rock stuff or through different anti-corruption work or some through environmental things. And I said, have you guys heard of this? Do you know about this pipeline? This is back in January. And the answer was, no, never heard of it. Oh, don't you mean the pipeline that's going to go through Western Maryland? Like, no, this is an entirely different project. And even now I still get, no, that's in the Western Maryland, not the Eastern Shore. But basically nobody had heard of it. I also reached out to at least a dozen green nonprofits and said, are you guys going to be doing anything to oppose this? No response, or we're going to wait and see what happens, was basically what happened. And so because we had a really different opportunity that Malinda and Tracy's groups did, I said we need to start now, because Malinda, for her group, the company had already applied for the port, applied for pre-permit. With Tracy, they were already buying land. On the Eastern Shore, none of that has happened yet. They haven't applied for permits and they haven't started buying land. They are planning to use existing utility right-of-way, but they can't do that for the entire path, so they're going to have to buy some land. But none of that has happened yet. And because of that, we have an opportunity to actually stop this project entirely. Once they apply for permits, they're gonna get approved. But if we can prevent them from applying, we can stop the project. And that's where we are with this. So we started back in January, just started with a Facebook page and a group, you know, a couple of public meetings, seeing who wanted to be involved. I made the mistake at the beginning of assuming that if somebody came to the meeting, it was because they wanted to oppose the pipeline. I didn't realize that people were there to learn about the pipeline. I just assumed that it was that people were like, oh, heck no, we need to stop this. So kind of adjusted our strategy since then, and now we do more public education meetings. And then if, you know, say if you want to get involved, here's what we're doing. It's hard because I live on the Western Shore. I've reached out to a lot of people on the Eastern Shore to try to get them involved, and a lot of people want to take a support role or a, you know, I'll help you with this kind of role, but nobody's really ready to step up and take that leadership role, nobody that I've found yet. And so, you know, so that makes it challenging, especially because the Eastern Shore is such a closed, you know, kind of community. But we're doing what we can. So the project itself, it's a 190-mile frac gas pipeline. It's going to go from Rising Sun to Accomack, Virginia. If you remember the map that Malinda put up, there was the transcontinental line, Transco line that goes from northeast Pennsylvania and cuts diagonally through Maryland this way, or was this way? So this pipeline is actually going to attach into that one, and then go across Rising Sun and turn south and go down the Eastern Shore. It's going to cut through 8 of the 9 Eastern Shore counties. We've counted at least 10 large rivers. I would assume it would be at least similar to what Malinda said in the 300 as far as small waterways go, but the 10 large rivers include, we'll come back to that. I have a whole slide for that. And then it's going to connect to a proposed compressor and power station that they're going to put in Denton. So that's not been built yet either, but as somebody said earlier, you need to have the compressor stations every so many miles in order to push the gas.
Every 40 to 70 miles.
This is a 26-inch pipeline, so kind of in between the two. And then the purpose of the pipeline, the only purpose we've found stated publicly is to provide gas power to the poultry industry in Virginia. So there's currently a processing plant in Virginia that you know, takes the chickens and processes them to be sold. And they want to, it's a coal-powered plant, they want to transition it to fracked gas, and then they want to build a second processing plant as well, in addition to another power plant on that peninsula. So this is the map. So this is where the chickens would be, and another power plant there. Denton is somewhere right around here. And then this is where that Transco line goes. This is Rising Sun. It's going to go right through neighborhoods in Rising Sun. The picture that Tracy showed where it was right through houses, exactly the same thing in Rising Sun. It's also going to go through Elkton, or that's northeast rather, Chesapeake City, you know, a number of towns along here. We've seen 2 maps. One map that actually goes around Salisbury and down, and then this is the one that was actually put out more recently. And then it crosses into Virginia. So because this is a 2-state project, even though this is it's only about 20 miles of Virginia, this falls under FERC. It's not a Maryland project, it's a FERC project. As everybody mentioned, this project is for profit. Something I want more people to understand, that I wish I could find a way to make them understand this, the oil and gas industry is a Ponzi scheme. They can't make money unless they build. And the way that they make money is by getting investments for the next project. And then those are the investments that they pay off the old project with. Because the long term, it's a long-term payoff. You know, you're putting millions and billions in upfront, and then you charge people over years. And that's how that would normally get paid off. In this case, these oil and gas CEOs and executives, they want the money now. So they keep building projects, so they keep getting new investments. They get their bonuses. They take their bonuses, and then they move on to the next project. And it's not, you know, the projects aren't actually paid off for 10 or 20 or 30 years. So it's a Ponzi scheme. The only way they can continue to be profitable quarter after quarter is to build. That's something that's really important to understand. We did find out that, so we've been doing a lot of research, a lot of, you know, asking questions from Malinda, from Tracy, working with somebody from Shore Rivers and a couple of other groups. One of the things we found out is that there's this organization called the PJM. I don't know what it stands for, but it is a private company that's basically, it's called a regional transmission organization that coordinates movement of wholesale gas, wholesale power in any region, because every single one of the power plants produces X, number of whatever they call wattages or whatever, and they all want their piece of the pie. So the PJM is like a switchboard, and it actually says, okay, you're going to provide it for this area for this time, and then you're going to provide it for this area for this time, and it kind of moves it around so that not one company, not one power plant is providing all of the power for all the area at the same time. What we've learned, though, is that the PJM has stated several times that there's an overabundance of electricity already in this area. We've got coal, we've got solar, we've got, natural gas facilities, we've got, there's even some geothermal. Baltimore City burns its trash for electricity. There's an overabundance of electricity being produced already. So the claim that there needs to be a power plant in Denton, Maryland is a false claim. It doesn't need to be created to provide Denton with electricity. They already have electricity.
If I can interrupt, even the Ponzi scheme idea, so in order for FERC to permit projects, all they need to see is that the gas going through it is contracted. So the gas industry needs to find buyers. Like, they could get electricity other ways if there's an excessive amount of electricity in this area, or power, or energy. But if they want to contract with the gas industry, and they do, that's all the gas industry needs to get permits from FERC and for FERC to give permission for the lines to go in. So they could give permission for this project, and there's no assessment within the FERC process. That's why we've been trying to force FERC to do what they do differently. There's no process within the FERC strategy to prove that it's a necessary line.
Right.
If it's contracted, then it's necessary.
Right, and so by saying, well, we're gonna build a power plant, that means that gas is then contracted. So it's a brand new power plant that doesn't need to exist because there's already an overabundance of electricity.
Right.
But if they know that a customer, which in this case is Spectrum Energy, is gonna build that plant, all of a sudden that pipeline is needed. It's also the poultry industry. So because they know that the poultry industry is gonna use it, all of a sudden that pipeline's needed. Currently, that poultry processing plant is coal powered. I would prefer to see it stay coal powered until we transition to something else. They say that these are, the natural gas is the next step to clean energy. Just keep it the way that it is. It's already built, it already exists, we already know how to deal with it. And then let's go to something, something really clean. So it's a lie, it's a bullshit lie, sorry. Excuse my language. One side note, and I think you're gonna talk about this, I think with the neighborhood sun stuff, any person who gets electricity can choose who they get their electricity from. You can say, I want to get mine from solar, I want to get mine from geothermal, from wind, I want to get mine from the trash incinerator. You can decide. So you just have to reach out to those companies and say, please change my delivery to your company. If you don't decide, in this area, BG&E decides for you. And they just give you the cheapest rate, but they're all pretty comparable. So again, this project isn't needed, it's for profit, plain and simple. But because people with money have set the system up to do, to help themselves, and they're able to exploit the system because they have the resources, they're going to try to build this project to get money out of it, to get those, those executive bonuses. So the river crossings, back to the map, these are some of the river crossings. There's definitely going to be more. That map that was sent out is not to scale. That blue line would be like 10 miles wide. But we did go through and kind of more carefully figure out where it would cross. Some of these are tributaries, some of them are the full rivers. One of them feeds the Delaware Bay, the rest feed the Chesapeake Bay, or down, into the southern Chesapeake.
Have
And
you
then-
worked with Fact Checker?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's,
Because
I
they
don't
do
know.
maps.
Oh, I haven't worked with them, we just been to the website.
Oh, you should contact them because they might create a map for you.
Okay, I didn't know this.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, because their website's kind of wonky. Plus, it's going to cross, of course, marshlands, natural habitats, farms, forests, all that stuff. Another thing to understand about the Eastern Shore is it's basically marshland, even though even the harder surfaces are still marshy and still sandy. It's even, I would think, in my mind, it's even less stable than the karst geography of West Virginia, and probably even less stable than Pennsylvania. Because it's basically, I mean, they even say that the land is sinking on the eastern shore.
Yeah, it is.
All right, so these are just a few pictures. All my pictures are from northern Pennsylvania. This is another resistance camp called Camp White Pine that I think most of us, or me and Malinda, have been in contact with and had conversations with. They also did kind of a resistance camp, sort of like Standing Rock did. It was a woman and her daughter. They've both been arrested. The pipeline is now going through their land. So all these are pictures from construction. Actually, I lied. This one's from Virginia. The rest of them are from Pennsylvania. But this is upstream of construction, downstream of construction, same day. And of course, they say, you know, nothing goes into the river. It's all captured. We dispose of it, but that's okay. This one actually is from Pennsylvania. So this is during construction, and it's runoff from they use like a drilling slurry when they drill to kind of keep the drill cool. And it's not as bad as the drilling slurry for the fracking, but it's not good. And then it ends up in the rivers. So that some of our concerns, besides the fact that this is a corporate for-profit project where average people are taking all the risk and getting zero benefit, because just like the Pennsylvania one, this isn't for residential use, it's for the poultry industry. Anytime we build any infrastructure, it supports fracking, even if it's not here. And again, Malinda mentioned NIMBY earlier. If you don't know, that stands for Not in My Backyard. And this is exactly what she said. If we allow a pipeline here, that's screwing over the people in Pennsylvania that are now, you know, that have to deal with fracking. And we've got to see it more globally. We've got to say we can't allow this here because it's going to hurt our neighbors to the north.
And because we allow the Transco line, it's feeding this line that you're talking about.
Right, it's all super connected. If you want to go even a level deeper, all of this is even connected to the healthcare industry, and it just goes on and on and on. You know, these pipelines obviously damage the environment both during and after construction. They leak methane, the compressor stations leak, the power plants leak methane. There's always the danger of explosions, which we'll talk about in a little bit. And then they use this as an, you know, it's kind of this catch-22 excuses. They say, well, we can't transition to solar because we're not ready, so we're going to use gas. And because we're using gas, we're not going to transition to solar, and they just keep doing this, you know, around the wheel thing. The bottom line is, as long as they can get money out of this, they're going to do it. And again, it's a Ponzi scheme. And if the people that don't do it don't have the money to do it, or if we, you know, prohibit them in some way, then they're not going to be able to. The pipelines also lower property values nearby. One of the things that nobody's talked about yet is the man camps, which we'll talk about a little bit more later, if I have the time, that is. But man camps are when the outside pipeliners come in. The people that build these pipelines are not locals. They're from different states. They bring their RVs. Sometimes they bring their wives. A lot of times they're single, and they often, you know, have a lot of extra money and free time, and they drink and they do drugs and they drink and drive and they do a lot of stuff like that. If you, there's in another slide, we have a link for learning more about that if you want to. The risk of contamination is high in like so many different ways. Water, air, it can go on and on. All the real risk is assumed by property owners. Now, a lot of people say, well, don't they pay fines? Sure, but half the time they don't pay them. Fines don't undo the damage. Fines, the fine money doesn't go to the homeowners, it goes to the state or the, you know, whichever agency. And, you know, if somebody dies, a fine's not going to bring that person back. If you're a farmer and a pipeline goes through your farm, they have anywhere between a 20 and I've read up to 70% decreased yield near the pipeline, both of course because of the land loss, but also because once the pipelines are active, they're hot, and so things can't grow around them. And farmers can apply for farm yield loss insurance, but after time, they're not going to do that. So they might be able to do it for a year or two, but they can't get it every year. So that means now a productive farm is less productive, and that's actually going to lose jobs. And then, of course, the construction endangers wildlife. So this is a picture from Pennsylvania. This is actually from fracking. It's not a pipeline. What's that? Yeah, I think so. This is something that, this picture floats around. I don't actually know who the person is or who took it, but I've seen it on a number of things. But this is the way that tap water looked after fracking began. So this is one of the long-term, one of the things I've started kind of thinking about in my own life recently is like the obvious, and then as far as the implications of something, you've got the obvious, a little bit less obvious, and even less obvious. So if we allow a pipeline, it's saying that we're okay with this water being like this. All of these pictures from here on until the next section are from Camp White Pine. So this is private land that they tried to stop the pipeline, weren't able to, so this is all construction. Again, more runoff and more of these little dinky things that don't do anything. The pipeliners, they're known as pipeliners. They're, I would say, pretty inept. I have more stories in a second, but they tend to be not exactly professional. They have identified themselves as pipeliner trash. And if you look at this, it kind of has a militant look to it, but I mean, they're proud of this. I love explosives. And then this person, I believe, and this is on that woman's property. These were all taken by her. I believe these two men are going to do some tree felling because that is a chainsaw and that's a big rope. And they're being guarded by somebody with an AK-47.
They were, U.S. Marshals were brought out with AK-47s.
And so he's got an AK-47 there, and he's got a sidearm there to protect people cutting down trees. So again, when I said collusion, this is the federal government protecting a private company to cut down trees that are supposed to be shared by everybody.
From the landowners on the landowners' own property.
Right.
Invading their property.
Sorry, I'm losing my voice. And that was what? That was when they first started, right?
That was 2 years ago, year and a half ago, maybe?
Because
Year and a half ago.
I assume that the reason that they were brought in is because these two women did tree sits and were making a lot of noise and giving them trouble. So.
And it was because it was taken from eminent domain, U.S. Marshals were brought in.
Oh, is that on?
Yeah, that has to be, if it's a FERC issue, a federal issue, yeah.
I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah.
Good to know.
I can give you more details on that later.
Yeah, definitely. I swear I get a ton of information from both of them, from her and from her. Okay, so since I've been following this more closely, I started following pipeline stuff at Standing Rock in August of 2016. That was going on 2 years ago. But since I've been following it way more closely, like talking to people on a regular basis and saying, what are we going to do to stop this here? This is everything that's happened. This is a short list. It's not a full list of everything that's happened. The explosion in Belleville, Texas, that was last week. That was a power plant that exploded. The explosion in West Virginia, that's the one that Tracy talked about. That pipeline had only gone into service in January, and it exploded in June. Explosives stolen from Pennsylvania. That was 640 pounds of C4 that were stolen from a site. When I say they're not very professional, they allowed explosives to be stolen.
And it was an inside job. They had proven that it was someone who worked for them who took it. It wasn't anybody from outside. They didn't even come look at us. They said, we know it wasn't you guys.
Right.
Yeah.
They did get the explosives back. Not all of them, though, right? Weren't they missing
Half of them, they got that. And then they swore that's all that was stolen, that they were wrong with the amount that was sent.
So anyway, there's about 300 pounds of C4 somewhere out there, basically. This is the movie, and I'll share all these links with Carl so he can share that to people. But if you want to learn more about the prostitution, drugs at man camps, The Intercept just put out this movie. It's like it's like a documentary. It's actually about stuff that happened in Canada, but it happens all over. Another side note: wherever there's man camps, women disappear, and a lot of times they're Native or women of color. And then the last one, and I apologize for the next slide. So this happened 2 weeks ago now in West Virginia. This is a pipeline that was being brought to a site. This person was driving a tractor trailer. Veered for some reason, they don't know if he fell asleep or he wasn't paying attention or looked at his cell phone or whatever. Pushed this pickup truck off the side of the road, pinned the truck, and for 20 minutes the person sat in the truck before he died, and he was pinned. So again, I apologize because these are awful pictures, but this is real life. This really happened. That man was 68 years old, and I think he was just going to pick up his grandkids or something. So these pictures were taken by another tractor trailer driver who put them on a Facebook group called Tractor Trailer Hotshots, where they call out terrible tractor trailer drivers for terrible and dangerous behavior. So that was good that they caught this out. Okay,
That was in Jackson County, West Virginia, right?
yeah, that was, yep. Here's the Belleville gas explosion, and that was on July 17th, so that was just 2 weeks ago. This was the Wisconsin explosion, July 10th. A firefighter died in putting that out. When I talk about these explosions really quick, the entire Eastern Shore is volunteer fire department with, they don't have pipeline infrastructure, so there's not hydrants everywhere. A lot of times they have to use water sources to pull the water, and they don't have the equipment to put these out. They will most likely end up getting donations from the company, either a new piece of equipment or, you know, a bunch of money, so that they don't fight the company, because that's what they do. In Lancaster, the fire department got, I want to say $10,000
There were a couple of them, yeah.
to not fight, and it's a way that they buy them off. It's greenwashing.
But also, local firefighters won't address if there's an accident. They call specialists in from outside.
So it
They
burns.
say local, we've had that with all of our local fire companies. They've met with Williams, and Williams said if there's a fire, you just stand and watch it burn until we bring in a specialist to deal with it.
Sounds good to me. That was sarcastic. And then this is the Trans-Canada one from West Virginia. These are just screenshots, so they're not great. But yeah, so this pipeline had only been in service since January. They said the cause was land shift, so Tracy talked about that. The earth, even if it's not like an actual earthquake, the earth still moves. It's called, it works. And they've identified at least six more areas at risk. So in West Virginia, in this pipeline, there's 6 more areas that could have the same thing happen. I want to point out something really quick. I read another statistic, I'm sorry I don't remember where, but up until 2010 approximately, there was less pipeline accidents than there have been since 2010 to present. And they say now where they're cleaner and they're safer and we've got better technology, but something that people don't realize is we've also downgraded our steel requirements. So the pipelines are being built with less quality steel. And so when things like that happen, they just split. They just, you know, it's like pot mess basically. They're not high quality.
Well, and one of the reasons that they go through rural areas is because the industry is required to use thicker pipe if there's higher density. So the class, it's class 1, 2, 3, 4, and the class of pipe they use with thicker lining is directly proportional to the population density of the community through which they're going. So my community, that's all rural, they can use class 1, which is the worst, the thinnest pipeline, because it's such low density. So they target lower densities because it's cheaper to use. So that doesn't mean that the risk is any less for the individuals who live near that pipeline, but fewer people will be collateral damage if there is an accident. And that's the way the laws are written.
And they're fine, again, they're fine paying that fine, they're fine buying off a family, oh, I'm sorry, because there was an accident in Indiana or Illinois where a father and son were farming on their own property after a pipeline was put through. The pipeline was supposed to be at 6 feet, it turned out to only be at 3 feet, they accidentally hit it and it sparked somehow, it exploded. I can't remember which one died, but one of them died.
Both of them died.
Oh, I thought it was just one.
No, I thought both of them died too.
Oh, okay.
And
well,
a worker was injured.
Okay, I didn't realize that. But yeah, but the company will basically throw money at the problem to keep building because even buying people off or even paying a large fine is still less money than the profit they have to make on their next project. And then this is more about the land shift likely. And then I can share all these links as well, but it basically says there's more areas that are at risk in West Virginia. And there's some kittens, because that was all terrible. Because now we're going to get into the good stuff. So that's all the terrible reasons why we don't want a pipeline, right? So we actually have a really good opportunity to stop this project in Maryland. We have an opportunity that Malinda's group and Tracy's group did not have. And that opportunity is that we heard about it. You know, Tracy mentioned there was a tiny little ad in the paper. We saw that ad. Before they could get anywhere, we saw that ad. It wasn't actually an article, but we found out about it, you know, soon. So because they haven't applied for permits or pre-permits, we have an opportunity to persuade them otherwise. The company behind it is a company called H4 Capital Partners. They are a private company. They've never done a project like this before. They're not a Trans-Canada. They're not a Williams. They're not a EQTP, whatever. They're not one of those equity partners. Yeah. They're not one of the companies that have done this before. They are a 2-man company that is located in Baltimore City, actually. And you know, a lot of these other ones have their headquarters in Texas or wherever, Montana, they're in Baltimore City. So we've got a very unique opportunity in front of us to stop this pipeline that the other groups haven't had. They plan to self-fund, which means they're gonna try to get private investments. So like DAPL and some of the other ones have gotten investments through Wells Fargo, PNC, Bank of America. They're not gonna do that route. They're gonna try to get private funders. We've heard it's gonna be a $2.3 billion project, so that's a lot of private funders. So from my research and talking to the two ladies that have already spoke tonight, I've kind of figured out a strategy for how to stop a project. Any project can be stalled or slowed down, and as long as they've got money, they're gonna push through, and they're gonna pay the fines, and they're gonna go to court, and they're gonna do whatever they need to do. But we can actually stop it, probably. So again, most of the resistance groups follow the same strategy. They try to get involved with the FERC and the MDE permitting process, which we will also do, but we have a step before that because those permits haven't been applied for, so therefore their hearings haven't been scheduled and their open houses and stuff haven't been scheduled. So I put together this like timeline, I guess, of how different ways to resist. So resistance is both trying to get the project stopped and just resisting the legitimacy of the project. Like she said earlier, you know, the project's in, but they're still giving them hell because it's not right. So we're in phase 1, and that's where we can try to get this company to pull the project all together. One thing I didn't mention is that they have the company has a number of shell companies under it. One of them claims to be clean and renewable energy, solar and wind. And so that opens an opportunity for us to actually go to them and say, hey, we see you say you do these things too. Why don't you do that instead? If you do that instead, we'll support you. If you don't do that, we're going to fight you.
And when we started doing our actions, we started getting calls from investors all over the country who were investing in the project because they wanted to know what our resistance was, how long we planned on doing this, and how much we were going to delay the building of this pipeline. Because that affected their decision.
Right.
And Williams stock started going down.
Right.
And they paid $3 million for a property worth $200,000 to get rid of us. And so we were like, we're just like kindergarten teachers and pastors. Like, we're not activists, but they're threatened more by us because we're legitimate and we're in the community and we have integrity in how we do what we do. And so people like you can threaten and have a project pulled at the early stages.
Right. Yeah, I truly believe we can get this project pulled. And one of the things Malinda said about the investors, that's a key thing. With the other projects, again, it's Bank of America, it's Wells Fargo, you know, they're not gonna care as much, but this is private investors. We can exploit that. I'm gonna use the word exploit, it might sound awful, but we can exploit that to our advantage. Private investors probably aren't gonna wanna tangle with any kind of nonsense that we create. You know what I mean? Like, they're just gonna be like, it's not worth it, but. And that's something we can use to our advantage. The fact that they live in Baltimore and they've never done a project, we can use that to our advantage. There's a couple other things that I don't say publicly that we can use to our advantage, and we're going to have a timeline of how we unveil this information to the public. All those things are things we can use to our advantage.
How do you find out who the investors are to go to attack the investors?
That is one thing we haven't figured out yet, and I'm not sure if they have to. Do they have to include it on the permits? They just have to prove that they have a bank account with X amount in it.
Because we go to the investors and give the, that'd be a direct line.
I don't think we're going to be able to have that direct line, but I think that we can make, if we get enough press, it'll get to them, hopefully. I mean, that stuff we'll have to figure out. But yeah, I know they have to prove that they have enough money in the bank to be able to finish the project and pay for any kind of fines. And I think FERC does look into that maybe. But yeah, but that's as far as the money goes, that's all. But I mean, we can still make noise, we can still make them, uncomfortable about, because if they're private money at that point, or maybe, maybe they own an equity firm and they're investing their equity firm's money, but it's not public money. It's not like the Williams, which has stock and people can buy it. It's private. So anyway, yeah, we're going to do anything we can to try to get them to pull this project. And I will talk about that a little bit more in a minute, because that's where we are right now, and that's where we need as much help as we can get. Phase 2. If the permits, once they apply for permits, if they ignore us, if they say, screw you guys, we're not gonna listen, we can try to get them defunded. They kind of, phase 1 and phase 2 kind of overlap there. We could try to get some sort of legislation passed in the state of Maryland. I think somebody mentioned the No More Gas Infrastructure campaign that started. As far as I know, the only legislation that they've decided on is actually no more gas storage facilities, but it doesn't include no more pipelines. And I believe that's probably because of something like Malinda said, where the federal government preempts what the state can do if it's an interstate pipeline. So the state might not be able to pass that law. That's something where people need to do research and figure that out.
Or they could pass a law and challenge the federal government's right to violate and exploit the health and safety of their community members.
Okay, so one of the, well, again, these are all questions, you know, we don't know because it hasn't been done before. If it had been done, we wouldn't be here tonight.
Right.
But one of the issues is that, well, there's a pro and a con. Somebody also mentioned the elections. We could try to get as many candidates on board as we can. My group is a nonpartisan group. We're not going to endorse candidates or anything like that. But anybody else who wants to go to a candidate and say, will you stop this project? By all means do it. Get it on record. Video it, record it, get it in an email, and then, you know, we can use that publicly. And then the downside is that one of the leading advocates of resisting pipelines didn't win his reelection bid, so we will have one less advocate in the General Assembly in January.
Mm-hmm.
That was Shane Robinson. We'll have others that will come in to replace him, but that relationship was already there, so new relationships will have to get built. And then also deny permits, like Malinda said, permits don't get denied. The FERC permits don't get denied. The Maryland Department of the Environment, whose job is not to protect the environment, their job is to just deal with environmental things. They defer to FERC. So if FERC says it's approved, then they approve it. And there's nothing that requires them to do those other permitting processes or those other research projects. But we can request them, we can challenge the validity of things in court, stuff like that. Our group is not a funded group. We're not gonna have the money to hire lawyers unless we can start super fundraising.
But that's, we weren't funded. Like
Right.
I had someone send me 2 $1 bills to support our movement. And that's how we raised the money, tens of thousands of dollars that
Everybody
we've
send
used.
your $2.
Yeah, like seriously, that everyone gave what they could in our community because they supported us. Like, we're not a rich community, and I mean, my husband and I were hardly paying our bills when we were going through this because we were spending thousands of dollars on the work that we were doing. So it's everyone in the community coming together and giving what they can.
Right.
Yeah.
We've got to, I mean, I really, myself, I prefer when things are grassroots funded. I absolutely do. The Represent Maryland is a membership group. We don't take money, any big donations at all. But we also have one big issue compared to Tracy and Malinda is that we're trying to do this not from a community that's been directly impacted. We're trying to organize across the entire Eastern Shore. So it's a lot more spread out and it's harder to build, you know, those kind of sense of community. Ideally, we'll get people who pop up as leaders in different areas and who say, you know, I want to prevent this from happening in my backyard. Let's coordinate. But that hasn't happened yet. And again, it's because they haven't started knocking on doors yet. People don't really start panicking until they get that done. But for now, it's a very theoretical problem that, you know, there's so much other stuff that's happening. People are prioritizing everything else, not this. So a couple of us need to prioritize this and lay the groundwork so that when everybody else says, oh crap, we have a plan and we can get, you know, people plugged in. All right, back to this really quick. Phase 3, what, you know, if they get their permits, we can just slow down construction, cost them money, give them a headache, do all the things that you see in Virginia, Steady Rock, that kind of stuff. But that's years out. And then phase 4 is if the pipeline is built, you know, and during construction, monitor it for ongoing violations. There's groups that are starting to teach people how to do pipeline monitoring so they can see if they're violating and they're poisoning the water and stuff like that. And just keep getting them fined, you know, make them work for it, make them pay for it. So I know I've gone over 30 minutes and nobody's given me time. So I'm gonna go through the rest of this pretty quickly and then if you want, I'll answer questions.
Cristi, it's a little after 9 o'clock.
Okay, yeah. So let me just go through some more pictures really quick. Nope, I don't have any more. So if you wanna get involved with the Eastern Shore Pipeline, basically right now what we're gonna do is we're gonna target the company. The company's in Baltimore City. We're going to target them and try to get them to stop the project altogether. That's an opportunity that the other groups have not had that we want to take full advantage of. If it doesn't work, we'll transition to the other strategies of permits and things like that. But for right now, we've got that opportunity ahead of us. So we've got a training on Sunday for nonviolent direct action specific to our campaign. Malinda's gonna be leading it, and a couple other people in the room are gonna be there. That's gonna be in Hartford County at 3:30. Everybody's welcome to that, and we are going to be starting with some civil protests and escalating from there as needed. So anybody can come to that, and then other ways, the easiest ways for people to help, sign up at our website as a supporter. That gets you onto our email list so you know what we're doing and what we need. Like our Facebook page. Also, please invite your friends to like it, because this is a grassroots movement, so it needs to grow. We don't have money to advertise. If you can donate any money, that's always helpful. We've got a PayPal. And then if you're on social media, share our social media. If you live in the affected area or any area really, talk to your neighbors, let them know that it's coming. Before we get to a protest campaign with the company, we are going to try to just reach out to them by email and phone and ask them to meet with us. And then if they don't, then we'll escalate.
And you should talk about the training, like your first action, you don't plan on being arrestable.
Yeah,
like
this
it's low
is
risk.
being recorded.
Okay.
I'm not talking about that. Sorry, I'm not going into anything because this is being recorded. So there's a set of culture of security where you don't want to put anything out there in public. And then what we always need help with is canvassing and door knocking. That's going to help build our base and let people know. We've gone door knocking twice. Nobody we knocked knew about it. Almost everybody was like, oh heck no, this can't happen here. That was once in Rising Sun and once in Denton. We have a sign wave Monday night in Salisbury. Again, that's going to be to raise awareness. We'll have a big banner so people on Route 50 Business, which is the one that goes through Salisbury, will see it. And then we'll have our website on there. Hopefully it'll get people's ears moving. Anybody's welcome to that. And then again, we've got some nonviolent direct action that's going to be coming up in Baltimore. And the training is going to be mandatory if you're going to do anything other than hold a sign. Also, if you are a writer, write an op-ed. A lot of times we need people to write op-eds, and you might not live in the area, so it might not be appropriate for you to submit it, but we'll get somebody else to submit it. That's a completely normal thing, I found out. I thought it was like fraudulent, but it's very normal apparently. We need help fundraising, making art and banners. And then because we're going to be doing the actions, anybody who can donate anything like that. And we don't have a lawyer yet, so if you are a lawyer, we would love to talk to you.
When did you say the sign wave is?
Where?
When?
This coming Monday, so it's in 4 days.
In Salisbury?
In Salisbury, July 30th. We're going to finish our banners at the local library from 12:30 to 4:30, take a break for dinner, and then we're going to go to the place by I guess till 4, take a break, and then we'll go to our location at 5. So it'll be for rush hour. We'll have about 10
Around
people there.
5 in the afternoon.
Yep. And that's it. Oh, we do sell t-shirts. They're available in youth, women's, and unisex. And then we sell these bracelets and these bracelets. Those are all just a fundraise because, again, we're not funded, so we're just trying to scrap together some money. I think that's it. And those are our contacts. Does anybody have any questions? I know I went over some. So.
Question in the back.
Hey, Ben.
Hi.
How are you? Thank you.
The shelf companies, is it possible, or is there opportunities to make farming schemes for renewable and good stuff and solar?
You know, maybe. I don't know.
I actually have a lot of these investors just invest in Ponzi schemes for solar, and except they're not in Ponzi. They're actually-
Yeah, they'll be legit. I think that it's really just greed. I mean, I think that it's because
I mean, has it been tried, or?
oh, I don't know. I'm not sure. There was a solar boom, and then something happened. Legislation happened, and the oil and gas industry started putting out a smear campaign, and it's. I mean, what Malinda said and what Tracy said. They are super shady.
Well, the approach of stopping before it starts.
Yeah.
At the same time, you get the good Ponzi scheme going.
Yeah.
They turn to that before.
I don't have the capacity to do that, but somebody could. And you're going to talk about neighborhood solar.
No, for 2 seconds, everybody's ready to go.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting idea. I just don't know how it works personally.
Just a couple of things. Thank you very much for all of you for your presentation. That was great.
Yes, you guys are great. Thank
On
you
the
all.
gas situation, well, I guess I should say one thing about the carbon industry is that all their worth is in the ground. they don't take it out, they're not worth anything.
Right.
And they're looking at a closing window on their industry.
Right.
Because solar and wind are coming along.
Right.
I mean, how fast it goes is up to us. But, so they're worried about that and they want to push through everything they can right now.
Right.
But in comparing gas to solar, the cost of building a power plant is about $1 a watt for both gas and solar. If you run the plant for, say, for 30 years, a gas-fired power plant at today's gas rates will cost you $19 billion. The solar plant costs you nothing.
Right.
And so that you're paying 19 times as much as the plant's worth to run it. And who pays that? The people that use the power.
Well, and it's also the future pays it. They're not thinking in advance. They're not thinking about future generations at all.
Right.
There's a native, I guess, thought theory of considering all your actions, consider the next 7 generations, which is what, 140 years? None of that happens. This is all the future's problem. It's not our problem because we got our money and we bought our jets and we're good.
Exactly. And so when people, they're the power buyers, all residences and all, that if were made aware of the fact that gas is going to cost them one heck of a lot more than solar is, they would really press for having that.
So if you wanted to, we need talking points. And honestly, like I said, I'm not an environmental scientist or anything like that. So those kind of talking points are things that if people send to us, we'll incorporate them into our presentations and
I
information
can send you
sessions.
an article on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
All right.
We can share it on Facebook or whatever.
Just on the same subject anyway, just to show you how out of kilter things are. ANWR, which is the Alaska National Wildlife Refuge, and for decades now, our government anyway has been pressing for opening that up to oil drilling.
Yeah.
And now Trump wants to do it again. There are 16 billion barrels worth of oil buried in ANWR. To put that into perspective, at the rate that we're using oil right now, that whole oil field would last us 143 days.
Yeah.
That's ridiculous.
No, those are the talking points that we need more of.
Laura.
Yeah, I'm sure this isn't an original thought, but it's just very frustrating because each group is working on their own pipeline. And I know they're very well connected to something called community of communities, where people are supporting, you're getting the support from the other pipelines. Everybody's pointing that FERC is, actually the main culprit. And there is a group that's working specifically with FERC. But the thing is, it's no bigger than any of the other groups.
Right.
I think they're wonderful people, but I don't necessarily think that the tactic they've chosen is gonna make any headway.
Are you talking about BXC?
Right, and
Yeah.
I mean, they're lovely people, but the thing is, because each of the other groups doesn't have enough energy to also launch a different approach to FERC. So, I mean, right now, FERC is the culprit, and I'm not sure unless we can change the whole mandate of what they're doing. I think right now they're down one commissioner or something. But I don't know if all the different groups could each launch their own FERC campaign.
I think that,
more of a groundswell.
I'll tell you from my perspective, if somebody gave me the tools, we could incorporate it into our work, absolutely. If we have to create the tools, it's not gonna happen. Because I'm a volunteer, and I'm tired. So yeah, if somebody made, if BXC, and Lee's gonna be at our training on Sunday. If he, if that's an idea that they wanna take on, if they wanna provide the tools for other
Are you
groups.
sure about that? Because he told me he wasn't going to do that.
They said today he was.
Okay.
Him and Maria
Because I just texted with him yesterday.
Oh,
He said he wasn't, so I don't
He
know.
said they were at Parkland, I don't know.
Okay,
He may
that's
be there.
Yeah.
They do things like cook pancakes outside and different cute things, and they've
Right.
gotten arrested, they
Right.
sit in chairs, you have to take the whole chair out with them.
I think that the tools would have to be digital probably, because I can't get people to drive here. I can't get people to drive to Harford County. Asking them to go into DC on a weekday is asking a lot, and it shouldn't be that way, but that's how it is. It's just how it is. I mean, people are learning, more people are trying to do that, but most people, if it's work a day and get a paycheck, that's what they have to do.
Especially communities like mine. I mean, my kids are known as the pipeline orphans in our community.
I don't know if that's cute or not.
Right, exactly. Like the spoutings blowing off our house. Like,
Yeah.
I haven't taken care of myself or my life for 4 years because I've been doing this.
And I'll tell you about myself. I live on a houseboat that I bought 7 years ago, I only paid $7,000. It was my entire savings. I've never had a savings since then because I've been doing activism pretty much full time. I do photography part-time to pay my other bills and eat. My car is 25 years old. I don't have a glamorous life in any way, but this is the life I chose. I want to do this, but and I don't have kids. So I have a very specific opportunity to be able to do this that most people don't have. If you've got kids, if you've got a mortgage, if you're afraid your car is going to get repossessed, they're not going to go to FERC that day. So digital tools, we need digital tools. We need, one of the most helpful things that anybody could do is write a guide on how to write a letter to the editor or an op-ed. Because they do have a lot of impact, and most people have absolutely no clue how to write them. I don't know how to write them.
Just link it to something that's already out there.
Okay, yeah, but I've never seen one. I Googled it, and the only things I found were, if you want to pay us for this, we'll give it to you.
I have links.
Yeah, okay.
So given the time, one more question, so I'm
And
gonna turn to Phil, and then Carolyn is gonna wrap up. Okay, Phil.
I was gonna throw out two quick things. So one was BXC, but yeah, that's a heavy lift because my understanding is they're designed to be a rubber stamp organization. When people get mad, they say, "Oh, why not us? We're just doing what we're designed to do."
But, well, wait, sorry, one thing. You mentioned that they're down a commissioner. There is a movement to get them to, there's a movement to ask Congress to not, what's the word? Confirm any appointees. Because if they only have 4, they can't make decisions. So there is a movement to ask congressional members to not confirm whoever's appointed.
Cristi, sounds like you need to get on those sort of checks. But yeah, actually, the second thing was, if anybody, I don't know if anybody's heard it, but there's a podcast called End of the Line with Whitney Whiting that takes a deep dive into all the aspects, mostly focuses on pipelines in Western Virginia. You've heard of it, but it takes a deep dive on all of the different issues that have been being talked about.
What's it called again?
End of the Line.
You want to write it down?
Yeah, so End of the Line with Whitney Whiting, found to be quite excellent.
No more questions for me, right? Yeah, okay.
Okay, let's thank our speakers again.
Thank you, guys.
And thank you all for your good questions and comments.
All
Carolyn.
right, really quickly, because everybody's tired and that was a lot to absorb. Okay, so firstly, I wanted to thank the Bensons, not only for filming this tonight, but for their work on 0 Hour and Parachutes for the Planet. This is one of the very few good things that happened, and this was a big project. It went on for, it started last year with Carl's daughter Callan's first parachute, and it went out to, which was signed by, I think, 1,600 kids. And then it kind of spread globally. So parachutes are being created by people all across the, yeah. And it was a 3-day event this past weekend. The lobbying was the 19th, the art day was the 20th, the march was the 21st in the pouring rain. And this was led by, it was a youth climate march, so done by the 0 Hours. So this was a positive thing, you know, one nice thing that we can report, our kids are getting involved. Okay, quickly, community solar. All right. Unfortunately, it's not going to stop the pipelines, but it is a tool to try to help. It is a renewable energy, it's an alternative, and community solar is not going on your roof. It is in solar gardens, down the road somewhere, there's dotted all over through the state of Maryland. There's a couple in near Baltimore, there's a couple on the Eastern Shore, which desperately needs it. There's one on landfill in Fort Washington, so they're around. And anybody who pays an electric bill can subscribe to it. Depending on which one, they're either 5% below for 5 years of what the utility charges, or it's for 25 years. So that's pretty freaking wonderful. It's going to be below. And it's also, if you're LMI, low moderate income, it's 10% below what the utility is charging. And it's no maintenance, no install, no upfront cost, no. So it's a wonderful thing, a wonderful new tool that we can utilize. We're hoping it'll spread like wildfire. Instead of the pipelines, we're hoping it'll spread off throughout Maryland, and hopefully will get us, you know, because this is the first year of the Maryland pilot bill, the Maryland Community Solar pilot bill from 2015. So we're hoping it'll, you know, take off and each year grow in momentum and replace the fossil fuel usage.
And
So-
that's how people protest with their dollars.
Yeah.
Mischoosing something other than fossil fuels to get their energy.
So here's some information. You can also put your name, and people have already, your name and your email and your phone number, and I will email you the stuff. If you know, I have tons of material I can email you, and I can call you and go over it with you. Thursday night, in fact, we had it tonight, a solar hour that people can call in and talk to, and all through the live chat and get information. So there's plenty of information to be had on this. Pass the clipboard around and this around for anybody who wants to. And then the very last thing, and then we are wrapping it up, is upcoming events for climate stewards. So we're sort of supposed to be on a summer hiatus, but you see how that's going. So, but in August, we're only having one event, and that is on the 24th. That's a Friday. It's the film Look and See. It's about the works of Wendell Berry, and it's co-hosted with Fair Farms. And we'll have special guests that evening. Good Dog Farm, Calvert Gift Farm, Bread and Butter Kitchen, Rooster and Hen, and we're going to have Chef Steven is going to be there. So we're going to have some nice food organically prepared for us. So that'll be a fun night. On the 13th of September will be our business meeting, and on the 20th of September, Laura Rosenthal, who's back there, put your hand up, Laura, thank you, is going to be presenting to us Pachamama Alliance Project. It's a 2-hour workshop on reversing global warming, introduction to drawdown. So that's something I'm really looking forward to having. So, all right, that is for next month in September, and that's it. Thank you all very much for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you, our guests.
Can we have 10 seconds of just silence, of purposefully thinking about what it is in the people in this room and the people we know and love that bring us joy before we leave? Just 10 seconds of silence, because I feel like we have a lot of negative. Yeah, just that we just heard. It's just 10 seconds now, starting now. And we go out with joy, hopefully. Thank you. Yeah, I do. Yes.